hunter was camping alone deep in the forest. Suddenly, a tiger appeared from between the trees and looked him straight in the eye. The man instinctively reached for his rifle in fear, but the tiger stood still. It was not acting aggressively. Then, it slowly began to approach, as if it were asking something of him, gesturing for the man to follow. Hesitantly, the man started walking after it. When they reached a remote, unknown part of the forest, the sight before him took his breath away. And at that exact moment, something incredible happened. Nature had always held a special place in Joseph's heart. The forest was a magical, mysterious world that he believed was worth exploring. Joseph had been born and raised in a small rural village in Russia, and throughout his childhood he had been deeply connected to the magnificent forests surrounding him. His father often took him into the woods, teaching him how to hunt, track, and observe the silent beauty of nature. As he grew up, Joseph felt completely at home in this wild terrain. He knew the forest like the back of his hand and had learned exactly how to move through it. That's why he decided to make a living as a hunter. But Joseph's passion for those endless forests and untamed nature would one day lead him into a story unlike any other, one he would remember for the rest of his life. For Joseph, it had all started out like an ordinary day. He woke up at sunrise, packed his gear, and set off into the forest early in the morning. That day, he had received a few orders from customers, and his own meat supply was running low, so he planned to hunt as much as possible. As the morning wore on and the sun filled the woods with a magical glow, Joseph continued his walk, unable to stop himself from admiring the beauty around him. By noon, it was time to take a break. He decided to cook one of the birds he had hunted over a fire. He had wandered into an unfamiliar part of the forest, but this didn't bother Joseph. Having grown up surrounded by nature, he could easily recognize his location and find his way back simply by tracking signs. A bright light shining through the dense trees ahead suggested there was a clearing. He thought it would be a perfect place to rest, but as Joseph stepped into the clearing, he froze at the sight before him. Right in the center of the clearing stood a massive tiger. Joseph's breath caught in his throat, and his heart started pounding in his chest. The tiger had clearly noticed his approach. As their eyes met the moment Joseph stepped out from the trees, but something unexpected happened. This huge predator showed no signs of aggression or fear. In fact, it stood there almost calmly, with a balanced and composed posture. Joseph interpreted the tiger's calm and unusual behavior as a chance. He quickly raised his rifle, instinctively moving into a defensive stance, but the tiger made no move, no attempt to attack or flee. It simply kept its eyes locked on his. Unable to make sense of the situation, Joseph decided that if the animal truly posed no threat, he didn't want to kill such a magnificent creature. He took a deep breath and slowly lowered his weapon. He took a few cautious steps. As Joseph got closer, the tiger backed away slightly and gave a low growl, as if warning him. At that moment, Joseph realized that the animal was female and that her teats were full of milk, indicating that her cubs were nearby. He also noticed she had a slight limp as she walked. This scene stirred an unexpected concern in the hunter. In a gentle tone, he began speaking to the tiger, trying to remain calm. Incredibly, this approach worked. The tiger stopped growling and allowed Joseph to come a few steps closer. At close range, Joseph was finally able to see how serious the injury was. On the tiger's hind leg was an open wound, likely caused by a bullet. But it was not a clean wound. It was infected and turning into one with little chance of healing. The animal was clearly in pain. The moment Joseph saw the terrible wound, he tried to help, but the big cat kept him at bay with a growl. Then the tiger did something truly extraordinary. She turned and began limping toward the edge of the clearing, stopping right at the line where the trees began. That's when Joseph began to hear faint mewing and growling. It was the tiger's cubs. The mother bent down, picked one up in her mouth, and limped back to Joseph, placing it gently at his feet. Then she returned and brought a second cub, setting it down beside the first. Joseph stood frozen, astonished and unsure of what to do. He didn't know what the tigress expected of him, and he was afraid of what she might do if he touched the cubs. Just then, the tigress began to walk away, distancing herself from both Joseph and her young. Shocked, Joseph called after her, but the tiger only looked back once before disappearing into the forest. He couldn't believe what had just happened. But he knew one thing for sure. A mother would never leave her cubs unless she had no other choice. The tigress must have sensed that her time was running out and that she needed to entrust her cubs to someone who could keep them safe. Joseph never considered leaving the cubs behind. He gently picked them up in his arms and carefully made his way out of the forest, heading back toward his village. Once he arrived safely, the first thing he did was take the cubs to the local vet. He wanted to ensure they were healthy and to learn how to properly care for them. The vet thoroughly examined the two little tigers, confirmed they had no serious issues, and gave Joseph detailed instructions on feeding, care, and checkups. Joseph followed every bit of advice closely, took the cubs home, and began raising them with patience and dedication. Over time, the two cubs, whom he named Sasha and Alex, grew rapidly and became stronger every day. Everyone in the village watched their development with amazement. But before long, officials from a city zoo heard about the young tigers and came to visit. They offered Joseph a large sum of money to buy them. But Joseph didn't hesitate, not even for a moment. No matter how much money they offered, he had no intention of selling them. He had been entrusted with them by their mother, and he wouldn't betray that trust. Many years passed. Eventually, the time came for Sasha and Alex to return to the wild. They had become beautiful young adults and had all the skills they needed to survive on their own. Joseph was heartbroken to part with them, but he knew it was for the best. The forest was their true home. A few years later, while out hunting in the woods, Joseph suddenly remembered that old clearing, the place where he had first encountered the tigress and her cubs. Despite all odds, he hoped that maybe, just maybe, the two animals he had raised might still be somewhere nearby. When he reached the clearing, he saw that the area hadn't changed much. Some odd holes were visible in the ground, but he didn't think much of them. He set up his tent, planning to spend the night there and head home the next day. As he sat by the campfire, Joseph suddenly jolted. A massive grizzly bear had emerged from the trees and locked eyes with him. The bear spotted him immediately and began charging. Joseph panicked, realizing his rifle was still in the tent. With no other option, he bolted into the woods. But the enormous bear had no intention of letting its prey escape and quickly caught up with the terrified man. Just as Joseph believed his final moments had come, two orange and black streaks shot out from the trees like lightning. Joseph's eyes widened in disbelief. Sasha and Alex, the two tigers he had raised and one day set free, had returned and now stood behind him, growling and defending him from the bear. They bared their teeth and let out fierce roars. After a few tense moments, the bear realized it could not overcome this unexpected defense and, growling in frustration, backed away into the darkness. Joseph collapsed to his knees, his heart still racing wildly. The two majestic tigers stood before him, looking at him silently before gently lowering their heads, as if to say goodbye. Then, without waiting for anything more, they turned and silently vanished into the forest. Joseph knew he would never see them again, but that moment stayed etched in his heart. They were healthy, strong, and free, right where they belonged. The second chance he had once given them had now come back to save his own life. And this story reminds us of one simple truth. True friendship knows no species. A bond born from the heart can sometimes change a life. If this story touched your heart too, share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more unforgettable stories.